In the early hours of July 31st, 1944, the submarine USS Parch was tracking a Japanese merchant ship convoy moving through the South China Sea. The boat's captain, Commander Lawson Ramage, had been stalking this particular group of ships for hours. Finally, not long before 4 AM, Ramage decided it was time to make his attack. He readied the boat and steamed into the heart of the convoy. What would later become known as Ramage's Rampage was about to begin. On June 17, 1944, the USS Parch departed Midway Island to begin its second war patrol. It was the flagship of a 3-boat Wolfpack under Commander Lewis Parks, consisting of Parch, Hammerhead and Steelhead. The group was nicknamed Parks' Pirates, though Commander Ramage suggested they might also be known as the Headhunters, since they had Hammerhead, Steelhead and himself a Redhead. The Wolfpack enjoyed a relatively incident-free journey to their patrol area between Luzon and Formosa, modern-day Taiwan. They arrived on July 1st and settled into a rhythm, submerging during the day and surfacing at night, while all the while scouring the horizon for enemy ships. It was a quiet period, with the only drama for Parch coming on July 3rd when she was spotted and closed down by a Japanese destroyer, forcing the boat into a crash dive. From the middle of July, the weather worsened, with at times 60-knot winds blowing and the deck of the submarine being swamped by the waves when it was on the surface. There was a contact with a Japanese aircraft carrier on July 19th that Ramage was able to get his boat close to, only for it to turn away and disappear at the last moment. A submerged submarine, unfortunately, did not have the speed to keep up with an aircraft carrier. The days dragged on, with Parks' submarines doing little more than battling the weather. It was deeply frustrating. When the scheduled end of the patrol came at the end of the month, Commander Parks, aware that his boat still had lots of torpedoes left, asked for permission to extend it. This was granted, and it almost immediately paid off. On July 30th, Hammerhead established contact with a Japanese convoy, designated MI-11. It was steaming south from Formosa to Borneo with 17 merchant ships and 6 military escorts. Most notable were the troop transports Fuso Maru and Yoshino Maru, which were carrying 5,000 troops each, and the 2 oil tankers Koei Maru and Agura Maru. After some confusion when Hammerhead had initially given the wrong position for the location of the convoy, eventually the other 2 boats in the Wolfpack were converging on it. Hammerhead herself was detached to return to port after having made an attack run on the convoy and claimed 1 ship sunk. Through the evening of July 30th, Parch closed in on its target, which by the early hours was to its southeast. The USS Steelhead was doing likewise, closing from the eastern side of the convoy. At 2:40 AM, MI-11 popped onto Parch's radar screen at a range of 34,000 yards. An hour later, with Parch still some distance away, Steelhead began its attack. Firing 10 torpedoes, it hit and damaged the tankers Koei Maru and Agura Maru before disengaging. The ships of the convoy began to fire flares, trying to catch sight of their attacker. The escort vessels closest to Parch began to fan out, searching for a submarine and giving Commander Ramage a chance to penetrate the screens. Ramage then ordered his boat into a turn to starboard, wheeling all the way round to take up an easterly course and attack the convoy. But by sheer coincidence, MI-11 also turned to starboard at the same time as part of its evasive manoeuvres following a submarine attack. This inadvertently put the American submarine and Japanese convoy on a collision course. Making a quick decision, Commander Ramage decided to press his attack, steaming on the surface headlong into more than a dozen enemy ships. Suddenly, the first merchant ship loomed out of the dark less than 400 yards away. Parch had to turn hard to avoid being rammed by it, passing down the side of the ship so close that the 2 crews could exchange insults. After clearing it, Ramage jinked his boat around to starboard to make an attack run on the freighter. Parch was at this point still on the surface and travelling at almost 20 knots. The Balao-class submarine began the attack with torpedoes loaded into all of its tubes, 6 forward and 4 aft. This will be important as we go on. Once the boat was in position, Ramage fired 2 bow torpedoes. It was 3:56 AM. The Rampage had begun. It did not take long after firing for Parch to observe that the target was taking avoiding action, steering hard to port to successfully dodge the track of the 2 Mark 14 torpedoes. Ramage held fire on his other forward tubes and continued to steer northwards, observing as the turning merchant vessel managed to inadvertently block an escort ship that was trying to make its way towards Parch. Now between the 2 lines of merchant ships, at 4:02 Ramage fired 1 torpedo from the stern tubes towards his initial prey. An explosion was heard and a hit claimed, but the source of the noise was never able to be confirmed. It was very common in the chaos of a submarine attack for targets and torpedo hits to be the subject of dispute, particularly at night, and particularly when you are carrying out your attack from inside the convoy. All around the American boat, the Japanese ships were firing flares and machine guns, while the escort vessels tried desperately to redeploy to engage. It was dark and the visibility was bad, so many of the Japanese crew could not see what they were shooting at, and plenty of gunfire was hitting other ships in the convoy. While chaos was breaking out all around them, a lookout on Parch spotted the 2 oil tankers sailing line astern and initially misidentified the long, flat ships as aircraft carriers. Ramage decided to attack them, steaming over and firing 4 bow torpedoes at Koei Maru at 7 minutes past 4. 4 good hits were confirmed and the tanker began to sink quickly. With the bow tubes now empty, Parch then quickly hauled round to starboard, lining up its stern tubes on the second tanker. 3 more torpedoes were fired in quick succession, with 2 hits and a miss reducing Ogura Maru at 4:10 AM to just 2 knots speed. In Parch's torpedo rooms, work was now going on to frantically reload the empty torpedo tubes. Normally the boat would submerge for this, but both forward and aft torpedo rooms were rapidly reloading despite the submarine being buffeted around by the sea on the surface. 2 forward tubes were ready again by 4:12, and Ramage ordered an attack on the Dakar Maru 4 minutes later, which was conveniently sailing right across Parch's bow at the time. 2 torpedoes slammed into the ship amidships, blowing a massive hole and cutting its power. Commander Ramage now circled back, bringing his boat's stern torpedoes to bear on the already damaged Ogura Maru. The Ogura was down by the bow, so its 4-inch gun on the aft of the ship could not depress itself low enough to hit Parch as she steamed behind the stricken tanker. 3 torpedoes were fired at 4:21, smashing into the tanker and causing it to finally sink. Next on the hit list was the troop transport Yoshino Maru. The crew set about calculating torpedo solutions while being raked by machine gun fire from escort ships to its north, to the point where Ramage cleared the bridge of almost all personnel for their own safety. Suddenly, the converted gunboat Kazan Maru appeared on the starboard side, clearly intending to ram. So focused on setting up the next attack, Ramage initially didn't respond to the shouted warnings of a ramming before ordering full ahead just in time. Parch swung round, missing the oncoming Japanese escort ship by as little as 50 yards, or as one crewman put it, maybe 50 inches. It would have been even closer had Chet Stanton, the boat's helmsman, not ordered full ahead a few seconds before Ramage himself had done so. After this emergency turn, the Yoshino Maru was now dead ahead, coming straight towards Ramage's boat. On either side, escort vessels were circling, and Parch's room for manoeuvre was running out. At 4:29, 3 torpedoes were fired down the throat of the Japanese troop transport. There were 2 hits, and the ship ground to a halt. Parch then swerved to port, firing its last loaded torpedoes from the stern tubes at 4:33. There was a large explosion amidships, and Yoshino Maru began to sink. It took with it 2,442 soldiers, about half of those on board. With escort vessels closing in and the remainder of the convoy moving off, Ramage now disengaged, managing to make it out of the area without further enemy contact. It had been an extraordinary attack, with just 34 minutes passing between the first and last torpedoes being fired. A couple of weeks later, Parch arrived at Pearl Harbor to complete her second war patrol. In that time, the story of what Ramage and his crew had got up to at the end of July was the talk of the submarine force. Commander Ramage was greeted on the quayside by Rear Admiral Charles Lockwood, the commander of the Pacific Submarine Force, who credited Parch with 5 ships sunk for 34,300 tons and Steelhead with 2 ships sunk for 14,700. After the war, the Joint Army-Navy Assessment Committee reduced these estimates to 2 ships for each boat and shared credit on the Yoshino Maru. As a result of what was becoming known as Ramage's Rampage, Commander Ramage was awarded the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military award for valor. He was the first living submariner to do so. Both of the previous awards had been posthumous. Ramage dedicated the award to his crew and even went so far as to issue a special certificate to every crew member to commemorate their own part in the events of July 31st. Ramage's Rampage was a remarkable moment in the submarine campaign against Japan, but only one moment out of many. In 1944, American submarines would sink hundreds of ships in the climax of a battle which ultimately brought Japan to its knees, and which you can learn about in another video of mine. Thanks for watching everyone and for all your support in 2021, and I will see you in the new year.